A lot of it went back to old school selling. Let's go back to our relationships. Who have we ever done business with? How do we reconnect with them? We focus on three main verticals: accounting and finance, technology, and sales and operations. How do we actually get video or on site meetings with CFOs, CTOs, CHROs, corporate talent people? And how do we go back to blocking and tackling with the basics, right?
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
It's Vivian Marin, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today we have an amazing interview ahead of us, but before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the show. We have shows within the show. Sometimes we have interviews with industry leaders and others who are shaking up the space and will teach you how to do something that they do that's helped them be successful. Sometimes we cover trending topics, items that recruiters are talking about or will be talking about very soon, and what that means for them. Every Tuesday, we'll drop a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that will get you better results in your day-to-day. Sometimes we'll open it up for Q&A where listeners drop in questions that they'd like to hear us take on. Send those over to podcast@loxo.co. And lastly, occasionally you will hear a mic drop episode from Matt where he shares something that's been bouncing around in his head about the recruitment space and things you need to know about. And as a reminder, if you like the content we share here on the show, subscribe for more. What do you do when your emails just aren't getting any engagement? You're sourcing, you're sending outreach to hundreds, if not thousands of recipients, diligently following up, and nothing's landing. No opens, no replies, no traction. That's exactly what happened to the team at Frederick Fox. Their email deliverability tanked, and it wasn't immediately clear why. In today's episode, I'm joined by Will Spengler, founder of Frederick Fox, who is going to walk us through how they figured out what was really going on, what they tried to do to fix it, what worked and what didn't, and how they're staying ahead of it moving forward. Will, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back on the podcast, Vivian. I appreciate it. It's funny when you say the email tanked because that is exactly what happened. And it started to happen, I would say, like late 2023. And then 2024, it was just no responses. And it wasn't until like mid 2024 where we started to realize, okay, we have a problem. We need to do something about it. What do we do? And then 2025 hit and we were like, okay, we need to triple down on this issue. We have to have a robust email infrastructure and we've got to take this extremely seriously. And it wasn't until I would say about 30 to 60 days ago in like, I would say about March, April of 2025, where our company really had a blueprint or roadmap for getting our email back on track and then ongoing maintaining that. So
yeah, you guys had a wild journey that I got to be a part of. So it was really cool to see how you guys started out and then the different things that you guys tried to kind of get out of that. Before we jump into all of that, tell me a little bit about how emailing was working like 2020 until like mid 2023. How was that going? Was it like the golden age of emailing and recruiting?
Yeah, and just for preface for the listeners, so our firm right now, we have about 55 recruiters. We're about a $10 to $12 million recruiting agency. So we have about 55 agency recruiters, and we have about 3 in the back office. And so we do have a fair amount of email outreach. And if you're a recruiting agency owner and you have a team, I'm sure you're getting a lot of complaints from your sales reps about email because, I did start the company, but we have partners now in the organization as well. And as a company, we were fielding at least 7 or 8 email complaints a day. And it just got to a point where it was, extremely frustrating. And so if you're experiencing this right now, just know that you're not alone. Almost every major company, if you're more than a single shingle or a 2-3-man shop, this is something that all companies are facing right now. And it is a major, major change in policies across a lot of email service providers. But back to your question, we were a email heavy shop 2019, 2020, 2021, 22. I would say the golden years of email outreach was really 21, 22, and beginning of 23. I mean, our firm, we were signing about 35 to 40 new customers a month, just sending blanket 1,000-person spams, automated emails. We've been a customer of Loxo's for about 7 or 8 years now. I consider myself a fanboy of Loxo, but back, you say the golden years, that 2020 to 2023, load up 1,000 people, you scrape data, load them up, do a 3-part outreach. You were signing clients left and right with leads and responses. And then fast forward to 24, 25, it just ain't happening like it used to, huh?
Dun, dun, dun. So, what happened in 2024? What changed?
Um, what really happened is there's crackdowns from Google and Outlook as well. Of course, Yahoo and almost every major email provider has created new policies around emails being marked spam. So, Vivian, you and I you every week you come as our customer service rep, and you kept on trying to tell me it's spam, it's spam. I didn't want to listen. If the policy has changed, I didn't want to listen. I wanted to continue using our fastball of sending 1,000 emails. So, as you know now, if you get marked 3 times out of 1,000 emails, you go into spam and it affects your reputation. Well, if you multiply that by, let's say for us, 55 recruiters, and you're above 0.3% being marked as spam, you're quickly going to go down Google and Outlook's reputation builders, and also Yahoo's. You're going to go down to poor. And what's really occurred is just a major change in email policy amongst all major service providers. And the reason being is they're fielding a lot of complaints from people that, they have customers that are getting a ton of spam emails, ton of phishing emails. And these email service providers, if they want to keep their customers, they have to make changes because they're getting a lot of complaints. I'm getting spammed every day, with unrelevant stuff. And so what we had, to answer your question, is a major shift in policy in 23, a big shift in policy in 2024, and that continues to tighten in 2025.
For sure. It's something that I'm seeing across all the customers that I manage. And it makes sense because as someone that uses email outside of work, there's just so many different emails coming in and out. And I could have sworn I unsubscribed to so many emails, and yet they keep coming back. I don't know how. And so as a user of email, that makes sense. But if I'm doing business development, if I'm in any kind of a sales role, that's obviously a huge, huge bummer. So now that you have come to the realization that the old approach from the golden age of emailing is not working anymore, what have you guys tried to fix that problem, and what worked and what didn't work?
Initially, when we really realized we had a problem, we really had to change the way we were doing sales. So a lot of it went back to old school selling. Let's go back to our relationships. Who have we ever done business with? How do we reconnect with them? And who are all our first degree connections on LinkedIn? And how do we go back to old school methods of building relationships we focus on 3 main verticals: accounting and finance, technology, and sales and operations. We do some other stuff in HR and legal, but how do we actually get video or on-site meetings with CFOs, CTOs, CHROs, corporate talent people? And how do we go back to blocking and tackling with the basics, right? So initially our firm went from, okay, the fastball is gone, to how do we go back to old school phone calls, video meetings, in-person meetings, and how do we go back to relationship business? That's what we did initially until we fixed the email and changed our approach, which was a multi-pronged approach on fixing email in our firm and is an ongoing thing that we manage. But I would say to recruiters out there that have, in the golden years of 21, 22, 23, send 1,000 automated emails, you got leads coming through. that fastball is gone.
Yeah. Now, let's say there's a lot of new recruiters that maybe started in 2021, 2022. So they have no idea what you're talking about when you're saying old school business development. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Um, it was about like early 2024. I have a business partner named James Aiken, and I called him one day and I was like, hey, I'm in a sales slump personally because I still run a desk all on the sales side. And he and I was like, look, I'm sending all these emails, I'm sending all these automations, I'm trying to do LinkedIn automation, I'm trying to do AI content, I'm trying to, do crafty writing and hit their personal and their work email. And he said to me, which really stuck out, was, Will, when was the last time you actually sold? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, it's a relationship and sales job. When was the last time you actually saw a customer in the flesh? When was the last time you actually made a phone call? When was the last time you actually did a video meeting with a customer? So when I say old school selling, and I think James really helped me snap out of a rut, was old school selling is that you have to develop a relationship with somebody, you have to present and meet them and earn their trust, and then ideally you're meeting them in person or you're meeting them over video, and you're developing a relationship over time that you're building trust. I think nowadays, especially to your point, the newer recruiters, they think they're going to hop on Chat GPT, scrape a bunch of emails, write automated content. They're going to sit back and make $100,000 a year clicking a button with AI. Not in this market.
What I was thinking about is I think that with everybody moving to be fully remote during COVID, that's kind of what led the way to have like the golden age of email outreach and email sales in 2021, 22, and then beginning of 2023. But then when everybody started to go back into the office, it seems like that may have shifted back into like a relationship business. Do you think that had a little bit of an impact on that, or was there anything else that you noticed that shifted in the market outside of just email providers cracking down? Was there anything else that you noticed that would have impacted the shift towards needing to do old school sales as opposed to just emailing?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point on COVID. There was just a lot more open to remote and open to filling jobs. You had a really tight market and a lot of openings. So that's a really good point, was people were more receptive then. I think right now in this market, if companies are hiring, they're going to have elongated interview processes. Every hire really counts right now for companies. And then you also oddly have this really tight labor market on the candidate side. So candidates don't really want to move jobs right now. So even though you have 4.2% unemployment, and you would think, oh, that it should be a lot of transactions, you have a lot of candidates that don't really want to move. And you have a lot of clients that if they're hiring, they're going to really take their time to make sure each hire counts. So what, the CEO of Robert Half said in his Q1 2025 earnings release, he said, what we're seeing right now is, although there's low unemployment, the churn rate is not as high, where people aren't really leaving and companies are very slow to hire. So it's like in the real estate industry, no one wants to buy with these interest rates and nobody wants to sell because, where are they going to live? So you see a lot of realtors just out of the market. Kind of the same things happening right now in recruiting, is that the transaction volume is really low. It takes, if you talk to a realtor right now, it takes a lot of convincing to get someone to sell or buy. And it's kind of the same thing right now in recruiting, where transaction speed has really slowed down and there's a lot more old school selling, trust relationships that need to occur in a lower transaction market. But to answer your question, outside of just COVID, I think that around the same time, so many people jumped into email outreach and automation, and AI tools became more accessible, that people just got overly spammed on. And for the early adopters, 2019, 2020, there was like a golden runway. But then by like 2023, if you were an agency recruiter, you weren't sending thousands of emails, like you were starting to do it, and then it just blew it for everybody. So, um, when they say if everybody's zigging, you got to zag. Everybody started zigging on email outreach and automation. So who's winning? The people that are zagging now, doing old school real selling. I'll pause.
No, all good. I love the zig and the zag. That's perfect. It's something that we talked about quite a bit when we were meeting on a weekly basis to kind of say, okay, everybody's doing this. And that's partially one of the reasons why it's not working as well anymore. You have to pivot, you have to do something different. And it sounds like James helped you figure out what that zag was while everybody was zigging. And so you started pivoting towards that. And then I think late 2024, early 2025 is when you really buckled down and wanted to tackle the email deliverability problem. And I think you hired a few consultants to help you figure this out. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I started reading Loxo's. You guys have a lot of great content on email deliverability. So I started reading like Ilya's. I think Ilya put out a lot in 2024, like a ton of content on email deliverability. And it was either on one of your articles or somewhere online where I just looked up who are the top 10 email deliverability consulting firms and ranked them. And I said, okay, who are the major players fixing email deliverability right now? And there's one called Mail Monitor. There's one called MailSoar. There's another one called Email Industries. And I just started calling. My plan was I'm going to call all the top 10 email deliverability consulting firms, and I'm going to talk to them about what is your process? How would you fix a domain and an IP address? How would you, like, what tools do you use? And so I went out and I collected like 10 statements of work from the top firms. And I started to see a pattern of like how much they were charging, what they were actually going to do to fix it, and then what the ongoing maintenance would be. And that was my discovery process initially. And I'm happy to go into that in more detail. But like that was my best logic. I'm not an expert at email deliverability. Let's talk to all the experts. Let's get a statement of work. And then let's do our own independent research and try to figure out what I should block and tackle first. So
That makes sense. What was the common pattern that you noticed across the top 10 that you were vetting and getting statements of works from?
yeah, I think it's amazing. They all charge like $10,000 just to do an initial audit. And then they have like usually I had one firm that quoted us $12,000 a month in email infrastructure. And one of the common patterns I saw was everybody first needs to do an audit. And then everybody needs usually about 8 to 12 weeks to get the fix. But then from there, there's ongoing maintenance that needs to happen. So, there's a lot to go into it. And I don't want to pretend like I'm an email delivery expert, but like it's usually first thing is authentication, right? Is your DKIM, DMARC, DNS records set up right? MX records, A records. So that's like one category is you got the updated DMARC with Google, right? Is your authentication and records on your TXT files all correct on your domain? That's like step one. And there's a lot of these fly by night freelance email delivery people that like that's their main bread and butter is authentication. Then I think the second big thing was reputation, right? And reputation has to deal with your domain reputation and your IP reputation. And then if you're on any blacklists, how do you delist? And how do you improve your reputation with all the email service providers? How do you even know if you're on a blacklist, right? And then what blacklists are you on that are material versus which junk filters out there are not material for reputation? So again, just to recap, we got authentication, we got reputation, and then the third biggest bucket, which you pounded me on, Vivian, was content, right? And that's the third biggest thing I think in email deliverability is once you're authenticated, once you have a good domain reputation and IP reputation, then it really is, and I didn't want to believe it, but you were right. It really is a content and volume game that you have to get right to get to that primary inbox.
It makes sense. Content drives reputation, if you think about it. So I think the technical part of it, the authentication itself, those are just the basics. And I think there are a lot of great resources online that will just cover the basics of like, hey, make sure that you have your DKIM, make sure that you have all the technical stuff set up. And then beyond that, this is where it gets tricky. And I think this is where you did a really, really big deep dive into figuring out what is your reputation, where are you blacklisted, how can you be delisted, and things like that. And then we'll chat about content in just a second. But what did you do about your reputation?
The first thing I did was I use MX Toolbox, and I just wanted to see, I wanted to check both of our domains. And I didn't have any major blacklists, so we were lucky there. We had a couple immaterial kind of like timeouts with a few spam, providers, but I realized it wasn't a blacklist issue. Now, so I didn't have to delist from any like major ones, like, and then as far as like the other big thing on reputation was we had to take a look at the IP. And so we were using a shared IP. And so what we did was we moved to a dedicated IP so that we could test and monitor that and make sure and just know exactly for the domain that we send bulk email out of, that we're managing that IP reputation and we have control of that. As far as outside of that, the biggest thing that I'm a big fan of, and a lot of the firms out there are using these tools, and the major one that I'm a proponent of is Warmy.io. They have another big competitor. The name's escaping me right now. It's called Folderly.ai. And I think MailSore has a version of it. But essentially, these are what they're doing is sending warming emails, and you can also purchase a lot of seed emails. And so what you're doing is you're getting authenticated you're getting responses to, so you're sending out emails, and then technology on the back end is opening them, marking them as important, and replying in a human interaction. And that process is warming up your email against the email service providers like reputation. So it becomes a game of how many emails can you get to open and reply versus how many are marking you as spam. So we personally use a tool called Warmy.io. I'm a huge fan of it. Please reach out to me if you're interested in learning more about this. Then we were able to, within about 8 to 12 weeks, go from bad reputation on Google, like we were in the gutter, to high reputation. And we were able to clean up 2 domains in about 12 weeks. And then now we're doing ongoing reputation management. We send, I won't give a number, but a lot of emails to keep our email infrastructure constantly live.
That's awesome that you turn things around. And it makes sense too that deliverability and the reputation is tied to how recipients actually receive and interact with the email, because the highest praise is when you mark something as important and you take the time to actually respond. And that is actually the perfect segue to content, I think.
Awesome.
Let's chat about content. What were you, outside of doing large volume of just sending tons and tons of emails, what has changed in terms of your content? What was your content like before? What is it now? What have you learned? What works really well now? And what are some of the things where you're like, please don't do this, guys. This will send you straight to spam.
So I've heard people call it like the magic email, but everybody has it. It's the NPC. It's the hot candidate that you think is targeted. Let's just take accounting, for example. you've got a controller at a SaaS. So you go out there, you scrape 1,000 CFOs in SaaS, and you send them an email that says, "Hey, Johnny, we're working with this great controller that's a CPA that comes from B2B SaaS. Take a look at their bullet points." And then you got your 5, we call them handoff bullet points that are selling the candidate. And then you have some kind of line that says, "Hey, reach out to me if you're hiring if you'd be interested, or if you have any other needs in accounting." And that was our fastball. I mean, we were doing that, the 5 bullets on the candidate. So you go out, you scrape the target hiring manager, you give them the straight to the candidate with we call them the sexy bullet points to get them to respond. That doesn't work anymore. And that was working like wildfire for a long time, and we'd have a really long email that would like really sell this candidate. That doesn't work. So that was our fastball for a long time. And what we've realized now is that you have to go that extra step to actually have a list that's extremely targeted of, I think the magic number now is about 150 in your outreach. And they're very, very specific. And I think the messaging needs to now be a lot shorter, to the point. And you did a training that was fantastic the other day, but really, yes, you can sell a candidate, but you need to more focus on what that candidate solves for them. And you have to focus on that and the value add that they bring. And your messaging has to come across like you're individually reaching out to that person, and it has to be highly specific. So the CFO SaaS, I got this controller with SaaS. No, now it has to be SaaS in the health tech space using blah, blah, blah. You've got to drill down a lot more. You've got to have better, punchier content that solves their problem. And it's got to be funny and quick-witted and something that someone would actually read. So I'm a big fan of like, how do I make this happen in about 4 sentences or less? And that's hard to do.
Yeah, that is hard to do. And this is something that we talked about during the training, is you have to put it in a way where it makes sense to the hiring manager of like, oh, this is solving a direct problem that I have. And with that, because you have to be so much more specific to really hit on and like poke their pain point a little bit so that they get that reaction and reach out to you. This is essentially where you have to have smaller lists. And so it sounds like it's shifted from, you're not just researching and putting a bunch of different research terms and are finding them and just adding them into an outreach. You have to do a little bit more intentional research to then have that more targeted outreach. And that actually seems to be yielding bigger results. Now, I know that originally when you started to make that pivot, it was a little bit scary to dial down the volume and to have a lot less volume, because that's essentially what it is that you're doing. And what would you tell recruiters who are terrified of lowering their volume drastically to become a little bit more strategic, intentional, and targeted?
Well, I would say that you just don't have a choice. I mean, I wish it were different, but with the email reputation, unless you're spending a lot of money on warming emails, if you're going to do thousands person outreach, you need to be spending literally thousands of dollars a month to pull that off of constant warming and constant email infrastructure. So it just, I hate to say it just won't work, but like, it's just the truth. Like you're going to have a very uphill battle trying to play that game. You're going to be marked spam a ton. Your reputation's going to go down and you're not going to get any results. So to give you hard numbers, we had it got so bad at one point in 2024, we had about a 5% open rate, sometimes even down to 3%. I just did an outreach the other day. I use Loxo, of course. I had a 43% open rate. And that is back at what we had in the golden years. I was studying our 21, 22, 23 outreaches when we were signing 30, 40 new customers a month. we were averaging like 40 to 50% open rates. We just got back to that. But when you go to like 200 or less, I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I do believe it's now in the Google and Outlook algorithm that it knows when there's a bulk send over 200 people at one time. So it's amazing. If you keep it more targeted, you'll get more deliverability and you'll get more open outreach. So on like 180, I know that that's not a lot of volume, but that's where you can get the 40 to 50% open rates. Now, if you just can't accept that, then you're just going to have to accept 5% open rates is what I would tell.
And that's not good for business. I like it. I don't like it that's obviously not good, but ice cold like a penguin. I like punchy, ice cold truths because essentially that is the zag, right? So if everybody's zigging, you get a zag and vice versa. So it's really good, I think, to just call that out just because it is so terrifying, especially for recruiters that started during the golden age. They just don't know any different. And recruiting has a high turnover, people come in and out. And so the old school selling would have been before COVID, which is now well over 5 years ago, believe it or not. And most likely a lot of recruiters have not been around back then. And so that would be really interesting to see how people take this advice and how they will fix this, implement this, and see the different kind of results. Now, before we wrap this up, what is your game plan for moving forward to make sure that email deliverability stays good?
Yeah. So I'll say a couple other things on content and then I'll answer that. But like we also had to look at links. We had to start to study plain text versus HTML in the content. Attachments, like it's amazing how an attachment now is undeliverable. And the last little piece of thing on content is there's a lot of these free email content testers. There's one called Inbox Ally that I really like, where you paste your email in and it'll pull out the spam words and it'll make recommendations. So like I had to start to study content a lot more, but like links, plain text versus HTML, attachments, and then starting to use like actually test my emails before I send them. And you'd be amazed at what spam words are like everyday words. Like one that stuck out was finance. Like finance is a spam word because there's all these people saying, do you want to finance your car? Do you want to finance your home? Do you want to finance? So I was like, oh my gosh, we do accounting and finance recruiting. I can't even use the word finance if I want to hit the inbox. Opportunity, just checking in. Like it's amazing, especially with Google's promotions tab. The promotions tab is fully based on content. So even if you have A+ deliverability and you're warm and you're spending $1,000 a month, Google now has a promotions tab where purely on content, if you are using spam words or promotional words, you will land in the promotions tab. Even if you've got the world's best reputation, it's down to content. That's how strict it is now. So I can't stress the content enough. But as far as to answer your question on what are we doing, I think it's trying to make our team aware that email is an ongoing issue. We run tests weekly on all 58 mailboxes. And so we monitor all 58 mailboxes at all times. We're constantly looking at our reputation. That's our domain reputation, our IP reputation. And we're also looking at the mailbox level for each of our reps. All of our team has 2 emails. We monitor those. So we're monitoring about 110 emails. And then we have ongoing warming with warmy.io. And the third thing that we're constantly looking at is, I would say training or making our team aware of the importance of content. Like, do you have an attachment? Are there HTML or spam words in it? Use these free content testers. Finally, and there's so many prongs to this, but also it's your email list, right? If you're sending to a lot of, emails that don't exist, the algorithm can also pick up on fake emails or spam trap emails. So constantly trying to take bad emails out, update and refresh, keep the content, keep updating warmy. And I think overall it's something I realize it's you absolutely as a company have to have an email infrastructure in today's policies, and it's a battle that you have to it's an ongoing battle right now that's not going to go away.
For sure. And that's really good to know. And you have a pretty big team. What advice would you give to other managers, agency owners that have a team of any kind of size on how to get the team to get on board with email deliverability best practices?
How to get on board with it? Well, I mean, if you're frustrated about your email, which recruiters get very frustrated, or if you're a manager that's up at night till 1, 2 a.m. like me, a couple other owners I know, and you're just researching all the time, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? If you're frustrated or you have a team that's frustrated and you're the manager, I think it's just you have to take this seriously. I do think the policies will continue to tighten, and I do think that email is only going to get worse in 2026 and 27. It's never going to get better, is my opinion. I think we're moving to a world where, you just take a look at the firewalls that companies have now. So even if you've got perfect deliverability, these companies, especially tech companies, they're going to block any outside email that isn't approved. It's never going to hit the inbox because of all of these AI tools. So you've got defenses from companies. I would say if you don't take it seriously and you're not willing to shift your approach and you're frustrated, I don't know what to tell you. That's the world we're all in, you know?
Yeah, and it's constantly changing because I was thinking about the history of recruitment not too long ago and how originally it was literally you just showed up at the place because they put up an advertisement in the local newspaper, or they had like a little paper hanging on like the shop front. Then people started mailing their letters because there was a formal application process. Then the internet and emails came about. And there were phone calls back in the day. People had filing cabinets. Those were the original applicant tracking systems, and staying organized was absolutely a work of art and science. And then job boards came to be, which kind of like changed how applicants can interact. And with AI, that just took things to another level. And as technology evolves, it just makes sense because previously it was phone calls, phone calls, phone calls. That kind of stopped working because everybody was using it. So everybody zagged over to emails, and then emails got oversaturated. People got tired of that. And so now it's back to old school sales, which is call them, show up, and have a video call. That's awesome.
I
Anything
think
else?
it's just
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's just relationships. At the end of the day, I think AI is going to struggle to replace relationships. There's all these AI agents that will now call and screen, and then a lot of people out there selling it like Simply Talk, and you could try to get away around it. Is like, everybody wants the one-click button and agentic AI that does your job, and you collect a $20,000 fee. Trust me, everyone's trying to do that, but I'm not sold on it. I know there's a lot of AI people out there that think they're going to replace the recruiter, but I think we're back in a place where you absolutely need to earn relationships, build trust, and those are the people that are winning, especially right now in a tight market.
That makes sense. I've been talking about this, that AI should be taking care of the very admin and time consuming things for you so that you have more time to actually build relationships. And so, although there are incredible AI tools that will screen your candidate, that will interview your candidate, that will write up the summary and things like that, that is what then actually takes away from you being a really great recruiter, because recruiters ultimately, the reason why they're great recruiters is because of their network and kind of like word of mouth. That is the number one and best way to get business as a recruiter, and that's the easiest. And so if you can stand out as a recruiter because you have an outstanding way of building relationships and maintaining them, that's going to give you the edge. And if AI can help you have more time to focus on relationships, then AI is 1000% a win. But if it's taken away from your ability to actually build those relationships, it's going to bite you back in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it a ton where people are researching AI all day long and 7 or 8 hours goes by and they never called a candidate, they never talked to a client, but they've been doing this master plan with clay tables and AI agents. So it's like, okay, well, did you actually talk to a candidate or did you actually talk to a client? No, but I'm doing all this AI, and it's like, okay, so I think somebody said it good. You do that research, but all that needs to automate your prospecting to do old school sales. All those things have to make it so that you're doing more old school sales. If all those bells and whistles aren't leading to more candidate calls and relationships and more client calls and relationships, then all that stuff isn't working. You'd be better off just old school call in main lines and making 20 phone calls. You'll get further doing that in 30 minutes than you ever would 8 hours trying to connect 18 different AI tools.
1000%. Something that I've been thinking about lately is also efficiency and what it actually means. People would say efficiency is, oh, AI is automating interviews. I have more time to do other stuff. But the reality is that you have to tie the outcomes and what actually really matters to efficiency. Because if you outsource the things that really matter where you actually have the power, that's really not making you all that efficient in the long term. And that's always like the interesting thing is that people are hoping that AI will make them more efficient from start to finish for the recruitment process. But the human part, the relationship part, that's still the very core of a recruiter. A recruiter is really just the connector. It's a little bit like a matchmaker for dating, but they do client and candidate, and they just kind of like bring them together. They're the perfect matchmaker. But the only way that you can actually play matchmaker is if you know both parties and have good relationships with them. And AI just really can't replace that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I come from a big shop background, and I'll finish on this point, but like what the big shops, Robert Half, Adecco, if you're running a full desk 360, their metrics, and people hate metrics and KPIs, but is to send 10 candidates a week to open jobs and to have 3 client meetings a week. So if you break that down, it's really 2 candidates a day that you hand off to customers. And so those are the real things. That's the blocking and tackling. Are we getting candidates up in front of jobs, and are we getting client meetings? And if the AI is not doing those things and making you more efficient at candidates or clients, you got to have one or the other to make a transaction. Then that AI is not working for you. And so the blocking and tackling and the basics, the old school stuff, it's like you got to get back to doing. I always say the business demands a certain amount of volume. Everybody always wants to pretend like it doesn't, and that they can use all these and send 1 candidate a week, but maybe you make a placement. But the business demands a certain amount of activity. I'm a big believer in that over time, consistently, if you want to have consistent revenue and results.
That makes sense. Any last words of wisdom that you want to impart on our listeners?
If you're frustrated with email, I was extremely frustrated. I've gone down the path. I've fixed it. It's an ongoing thing. Is it perfect? No, but are we much better? Yes. If you're in that place, reach out to me. I'd love to try to help you. I can save you hours and sleepless nights. I'd love to try to help you and give back to anyone in the industry that's running into this problem. That's it.
Awesome. We'll have your Calendly link in the description notes of the show. Well, Will, thank you so much for taking the time to come join us for the show today. I really appreciate you sharing all the knowledge and the hard work that you put into figuring out email deliverability. And I hope it inspires some of our listeners to start incorporating this into their day-to-day moving forward. Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you like this episode but aren't sure where to go next, you can find those in the show notes in the episode description of your favorite podcast streaming platform, as well as on our website at loxo.co/podcasts. For full video episodes, they're available on YouTube as well as on our website. And if you have specific questions or are looking for advice, you can send us an email at podcast@loxo.co. And lastly, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave a quick rating on your podcast streaming platform. It only takes 3 seconds and it will help other recruiters like you find us. All right, everyone, that's the show. This was an amazing interview with Will from Frederick Fox, all about email deliverability and how to improve it. Until next time, bye, everybody.